Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So this morning we'll take a look at, if I remember correctly, I don't know ever wake up. I'll take a look at okay. 1:15:38, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I ended up going back a ways. Last night. And this chapter is called "The Pandavas Retire Timely." Swarat pautram vinayanam
Svaratotram Vinayam
atmana susamam gunai
Atmana Susamam Gunai
roya nivyapatim abhyasinchad gujafaye
Abhyasincha
swarat pautram vinayanam
Svaratotram Vinayam
masusamam atmana susamam gunai
Atmana Susamam Gunai
roya nivyapatim bhume
Vaya Nidyapatim Bhume
abhyasinchad gujafaye
Abhyasincha Gajamaye
swarat pautram vinayanam
Svaratotram Vinayam
atmana susamam gunai
Atmana Susamam Gunai
toya nivyapatim bhume
Vaya Nidyapatim Bhume
abhyasinchad gujafaye
Abhyasincha Gajamaye
Surat Pautram Vinayinam
Svaratotram Vinayam Atmana Susamam Gunai Toya Nidyapatim Bhume Abhyashincha Gajamaye
Surat Pautram Vinayinam
Svaratotram Vinayam Atmana Susamam Gunai Toya Nidyapatim Bhume Abhyashincha Gajamaye Svaratotram Vinayam Atmana Susamam Gunai
atmana
Nidyapatim Bhume
Nidyapatim bhume
Abhyashincha Gajamaye
abhyasinchad gujafaye. Word to word. Swarat,
Swarat,
the emperor.
the emperor.
Swarat carries the import of the sense of independence, right? This is one of the characteristics of the Lord. Pautram,
Pautram,
unto the grandson.
to the grandson.
Vinayanam,
Vinayam,
properly trained.
properly trained.
Atmana,
Atmana,
his own self.
his also.
Susamam,
Susamam,
equal in all respects.
equal in all respects.
Gunai,
Gunai,
by the qualities.
by the qualities.
Toya nivya,
Toya Nidya,
bordered by the seas.
bordered by the seas.
Patim,
Patim,
master.
master.
Bhume,
Bhume,
of the land.
of the land.
Abhyasincha,
Abhyashincha,
enthroned.
enthroned.
Gajavaye,
Gajavaye,
the capital of Hastinapur.
the capital of Hastinapur.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapura, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas. Responsively, please. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapura,
Thereafter in the capital of Hastinapur,
he enthroned his grandson,
He enthroned his grandson,
who was trained and equally qualified
who was trained and equally qualified
as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas.
as the emperor and master of all lands bordered by the seas.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. The total land on the earth bordered by the seas was under the subjugation of the king of Hastinapur. Maharaj Yudhishthir trained his grandson, Maharaj Parikshit, who was equally qualified in state administration in terms of the king's obligation to the citizens. Thus, Parikshit was enthroned on the seat of Maharaj Yudhishthir prior to his departure back to Godhead. Concerning Maharaj Parikshit, the specific word used, Vinayanam, is significant. Why was the king of Hastinapura, at least till the time of Maharaj Parikshit, accepted as the emperor of the world? The only reason is that the people of the world were happy because of the good administration of the emperor. There's a note for temple managers. Okay. I'm trying to highlight that, and my creaky old iPad is not cooperating. The only reason is that the people of the world were happy because of the good administration of the emperor. The happiness of the citizens was due to the ample production of natural produce such as grains, fruits, milk, herbs, valuable stones, minerals, and everything that the people needed. They were even free from bodily miseries, anxieties of mind, and disturbances caused by natural phenomena and other living beings. Because everyone was happy in all respects, there was no resentment, although there were sometimes battles between the state kings for political reasons and supremacy. Everyone was trained to attain the highest goal of life, and therefore the people were also enlightened enough not to quarrel over trivialities. Mark that one. The influence of the age of Kali gradually infiltrated the good qualities of both the kings and the citizens, and therefore a tense situation developed between the ruler and the ruled. But still, even in this age of disparity, even in this age of disparity between the ruler and the ruled, there can be spiritual emolument and God consciousness. That is a special prerogative. Could I have some? One more? Oh, we've got that. Thank you. We got back late last night and took me some time to unwind, and then all of a sudden there was business to take care of. I have someone in India, so they live in a different universe from me. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnanam Janashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhagrum Lankayate Yat Kripatamaham Bande Shri Guru Dinacharana Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stavitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Nati Swapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shukryavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhavesha Patitanam Bhavadevyo Vaishnavyo Namo. The verse again, Svarat Pautram Vinayanam Atmanasu Samam Gunai Toya Nivyapatim Bhumer Abhyasim Shadgajapaya. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapura, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas. So there are a few things going on. I understand from the universe that the main topic of this verse is never marry. Stay brahmachari forever. Take sannyas when you're 24. And don't look back. But there are a couple of other things going on as well. So I wanted to take a moment to address that. Oh, somehow or other, the highlight moved, as if by magic. Um, so one thing is that because King Parikshit, King Yudhishthira, and King Parikshit are described in this verse as the emperor of all the earth, bordered by the seas. So we would assume that means all the 7 continents. How is that so? Well, there were challenges. There were always squabbles going on. There was always somebody wanting to have more power than they had. But essentially, there wasn't a real uprising, and there was widespread support for the emperor because of the good administration. And the indication of that was that everyone was happy with that administration because it was well organized, and it was organized in such a way that everyone had all their needs satisfied. Srila Prabhupada writes, where'd it go? They were free, the general people were free from bodily miseries, anxieties of mind, and disturbances caused by natural phenomena and other living beings. In other words, the threefold miseries were very much suppressed by the good administration of King Yudhishthira. And this is this general welfare is a big part of the reason for the Kurukshetra war. Of course, we know another reason is that a woman was ill-treated. And Draupadi is the original warrior princess. You don't want to mess with her, as it turns out, because when she was insulted, she uttered some curses, and she made a promise because she was dragged into the sabha, into the assembly in public at an inconvenient time of the month, at a time of the month when ladies are allowed to just kind of withdraw, and they don't have to dress up, they don't have to put their hair up and everything. So her hair was down, she wasn't properly dressed. She swore that she would not put her hair up until Dushasana's Dushasana's blood washed her hair, until her hair was washed by the blood of Dushasana. Bhima also made a promise: I will rip his heart out and drink his blood. So consequently, we had this massive war in which, by some accounts, 640 million men had to die in 2.5 weeks. But another reason was that Duryodhana and his brothers were selfish. And the extent of their selfishness was shown by the fact that when even Krishna intervened and tried to make peace, he said to Duryodhana, look, after all, they're Kshatriyas. Give them each a village to run, and that everything will be satisfied. And what was Duryodhana's response? I won't give them as much land as you can drive a pin into. And that was after everyone was shown the universal form, which made even Dhritarashtra's blood curdle. His response to that was, if that's what it means to see, I'm cool with being blind. So their administration would have been a selfish administration. It would have, although in many ways they were quite noble, still it might have been an administration as rapacious as perhaps King Venus, because of that self-centeredness, that ego, that sense of entitlement, so infected Duryodhana that it even disturbed his father. His father was also of quite noble birth and naturally noble character, but because of his son's envy, his heart was so corrupted that we see at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, in the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, in the third pada, he asks, Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva, what are my boys and his boys, Pandava's boys, going to do? What are they about? What are they about to embark on? These men were first cousins. We know first cousins, right? For many years, well, until I was just almost 9, I lived in a small town on the central coast of California. And my first cousins were my best friends. We had 3 cousins who were a little older because they were the sons of the firstborn. No, the secondborn, Aunt Betty. But still, she was a few years older than my dad. And so they were like our big brothers, our cool big brothers. And the rest of us were all about the same age. I have a cousin, Mary, who's 3 months younger than I am. I'm born in August. She was born in November. My sister had another cousin, Jim, the middle cousin in the other family, my dad's older brother's family. Same age as my sister, and the third is a year younger than my brother. And we played together all the time. We were almost like brother and sister. We didn't live in the same house. We didn't exactly have the same mom and dad, but we had almost the same affection for our aunts and uncles that we did for our mom and dad, and for our cousins as we did for our brothers and sisters. So this is practically the closest family you could get. They're one family. Srila Prabhupada wrote me a letter in 1973. There were some problems in ISKCON, Hawaii, and caused considerable disruption, at least for those who had anything to do with that. And that's where I started out. I was one of the first devotees in Hawaii. And Srila Prabhupada wrote, we are all one family. And sometimes there's quarrel, but that doesn't mean we should go away. So we see that Duryodhana was likely to have a very selfish reign, something very much like King Venus. And so this war happened. So there wasn't any kind of uprising against King Yudhishthira, and no serious challenges after his installation as the emperor, because of that good administration. It was so good that everyone was satisfied, and as Srila Prabhupada says, there was spiritual emolument in God consciousness. So there was actually a possibility of that society was organized in a way that spiritual progress was easy. Now, another thing more closely related to our Swarupa Lakshana, I guess, is, the point of how we should live our lives has to do with, the Pandavas, the name of the chapter is the Pandavas retire timely. Later, we'll see that King Parikshit retired untimely, right? But when it was time, and when Parikshit was properly trained, and everyone was satisfied that he was every bit as qualified as King Yudhishthira, and that good management of the society would continue, then the Pandavas retired. Then King Yudhishthira stepped down from the throne and installed King Parikshit. So this is this business of which ashram we live in. It is sometimes a hot topic. And Vrindavan Nattabara told me that I was expected to admonish everyone and actually help instruct everyone how you could stay brahmachari, stay away from the women, stay away from all the Maya and all that. My general response to that, my kind of off the cuff wiseacre response is, I just don't do that. However, my real response is that we have to be introspective enough to understand where we're really at. There's actually 2 verses in the 11th canto, second chapter and the 3rd chapter as well. So it must be spoken by 2 of the Navi-yogendras, and I don't remember which. Somehow or other, I haven't been able to sort it. I was awed and embarrassed yesterday when Vaisheshika Prabhu just rattled off the names of, there was a little stumble, but he just rattled off the names of the Navi-yogendras, and he can probably tell you which verses in which of those first 5 chapters are, well, in chapters 2 through 5, is it, or 6? That, anyway, which verses in which chapters are spoken by which of the yogendras. And he just like, it's Kavi Yogendra, that this is it, And I have to look, and actually have some friends who made me a little chart. It was a little pie chart divided into 9, and Kavi spoke these verses in chapter 2. Havi spoke these verses. Prabhuta spoke these verses. Shri Antariksha spoke etc. And I haven't managed to actually integrate that, memorize it, or whatever I need to do. But there are 2 verses that say, Svesvedikariya nishta saguna parikirtita, that real piety, real good character, actual good qualities are manifest in understanding our adhikar, svesvedikara, our own understanding, ourselves, understanding our own adhikar, our own position. Svesvedikariya nishta saguna parikirtita. And not to do so is considered to be a flaw. It's a dosha, not a dosa. We can't talk about doshas. Can you make quinoa doshas? No, because you want the beans too, yeah?
It's possible.
Doshas is dal and rice fermented and then
Quinoa,
blended in.
But I heard
You can do it with quinoa?
Yes.
And get it all bubbly?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to try that someday. So not behaving in that way is actually a fault. It's actually a flaw. So that requires introspection. And this is something that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur talked about a lot, was introspection. I remember this from my brahmachari days because our temple president, Gaur Sundar, was, well, he was both artistically and intellectually inclined. He was a brilliant man. I grew up thinking I was a really smart person. And funny thing, when I was a little boy, when I was like in primary school, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, maybe even a little bit beyond, I thought I was really smart because I was seemed naturally to be good at spelling. And other kids weren't necessarily. I mean, we actually had to have spelling class, right? And then in high school, junior high and high school, spelling class became vocabulary class, but it was really still spelling class, especially in English, you need that. But somehow or other, I didn't have a problem spelling English. And when I was a boy, my mom had a kind of a game that she would play with me where she would take, and my grandma gave me a college dictionary when I was, I think, 10 years old. So I had this big fat dictionary on my desk. And my mom would just open a page, pick a word at random, and ask me to spell it. And sometimes I would have to write it. And sometimes I could just kind of like write it in my mind. And there were very few words that I wasn't able to spell. Then in school, I always ended up winning the spelling bees, unless there was a cute girl that I liked, and she was also smart, and I would let her win, thinking it might score points. They still never knew who I was. I was still invisible to them. But so I grew up really, thinking I was really smart because I could get good grades without a lot of work. But when I met Gorsunda, I felt intellectually dwarfed, and this happened when I met, when I joined ISKCON. I ended up meeting people who were so much more intelligent than me. People like Gorsunda or Hridayananda Maharaj. Hridayananda Maharaj is really fast brain. Anybody ever meet Gaura Keshava? Gaura Keshava is kind of like, he's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada's from Australia. Big kind of pundit. He's kind of like part Gaudiya Vaishnava and part Sri Vaishnava. Because Srila Prabhupada asked him to go to Sri Rangam and get trained in the different rituals and things by the Sri Vaishnavas, and he actually became initiated into their ways. And he'll tell you, quite frankly, I'm not a Raganuga bhakt. Although I found it interesting that he has a Govardhan Shiva on his altar. Well, there's a little raga in there. He's very much a Raga deity. So he used to read from some of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's books, those books with those transcribed lectures. And what we heard a lot was about introspection. So if we actually look into our hearts, and sometimes we can do this in consultation with a confidential friend or with the spiritual master. This is part of the spiritual master's duty, is to help the students figure out how they're going to best work in the world in a way that actually contributes to the world and helps them grow spiritually. And brahmachari life is actually a wonderful opportunity where for us to completely dedicate all our time, all our energy to serving the mission of the spiritual master. We know that this was Krishna's own practice when he was in the Gurukula of Sandipani Muni. We know the story recounted late in the 10th canto when Sudama Vipra goes to see Krishna at the insistence of his wife. Apparently they didn't have two nickels to rub together, and she wasn't entirely comfortable with that. All the time she would have a little bit. After all, you have this rich school buddy. And so Sudama Vipra was induced to go see Krishna, and they recounted, they were reminiscing on their school days, and they remembered that one time when they went out in the forest to get wood for their guru and got caught by a storm and were stuck in the forest overnight. Everybody naturally kind of freaked out. So this is the business of especially the brahmacharis, Samitpani, carrying water and firewood, bringing water and firewood to the guru, any kind of service that the guru requires. And this is one of the first three angas of sadhana bhakti, right? First is Shri Guru Pada Ashraya, taking shelter of the spiritual master. And the second is Diksha Shiksha Adi, taking initiation, accepting instruction and other things from the guru. And the third is Vishrambhena Guru Seva. And Vishrambha is a really interesting word. It connotes trust, confidence. It also connotes intimacy. Srila Prabhupada talks about this in the third canto, in his purport to a verse that describes the nature of Devahuti's relationship with Kardama Muni. Speaking of whom, let me put a pin in that, I'll come back to that in a minute. And the verse describes her as serving her husband with Vishrambha in intimacy. And Srila Prabhupada says in his purport that the relationship between the relationship of the wife with the husband should be characterized by Vishrambha, intimacy, and also Gaurava, reverence. And I think those two things need also to be there in the relationship with the spiritual master. Intimacy, confidence, trust, and some sense of reverence. It's not exactly a buddy-buddy relationship. Not where there's friendship in a sense, in the sense that Sanatana Goswami says, the person who reminds you of your most beloved is your best friend. So that's the guru's main business. But in order to do that, the guru has to understand where the disciple is at. And that's, I think, best determined by open, confidential discussion between the two, where the disciple is actually able to share his or her heart with the guru, and without any fear of judgment. The guru is not going to judge the disciple. Rather, the discrimination is what's the best path for this devotee. And brahmachari life does provide this opportunity, sometimes even for close association with the guru, especially if the guru is a sannyasi. They are often accompanied by an assistant, and that's generally going to be a brahmachari. Not always. Srila Prabhupada's personal assistants were actually generally grihastas, now that I think about it. Who do we have? Harishari was a brahmachari. Nandakumar was a grihasta. And then a grihasta again, and then a grihasta again. I love Nandakumar. He was a good friend. But he had trouble settling down until considerably later in life. And then Shrutakirti, who was married as well. But generally, you see it's a brahmachari assistant or a grihasta who's able to get some, like Shrutakirti, be able to get some time off from household responsibilities. So sometimes you get that kind of close association. However, we have to be honest enough with ourselves to understand whether that's a sustainable situation. Living, independently in a sense as a brahmachari, at least independent of the intimate company of women and the responsibilities for maintaining a family. It's a simple life. We don't have anybody else to look out for unless we've got some kind of managerial responsibilities. Frankly, when I was a brahmachari, especially early when I was a brahmachari, I found brahmachari a life of relief. And our brahmachari life was a little different from what we see nowadays. Of course, you've got the New Vrindavan stories, early days of New Vrindavan stories, which make ours look like the life of Riley. But when I moved into the ashram in 1970, March of 1970, there were only 3 other brahmacharis. And there were 2 brahmacharinis, and there was Gorsundara and his wife Govindadasi, who is responsible for that painting. This is her vision, as she would have it, her revelation. Govindadasi is quite a character. And at first we had bunk beds, but they were bunk beds with plywood. So it was like sleeping on the floor. But we were able just to kind of stack people up and have a little room. later that year, more and more devotees moved into the temple, and we were all sleeping on the floor next to each other. We'd get back at 10:30 or 11 o'clock from Sankirtan, and then we just crash on the floor. We'd all just crash on the floor. And when we got up in the morning, we had a garden hose in the backyard that ran up the hill. We had a little pallet on the hill, and we'd climb up this hill, often in the rain. Now, of course, on the worst days, it was maybe 65 or 66 degrees when we got up in the morning. But when you live in Hawaii for a little time, that's cold. That's cold. If it gets below 60, that's really rare. I think we had two, maybe you were there then. I think it was probably in December or January. I think we had a couple of nights where it was 58 or 59 when we got up from Mangalarti. And that's just unbearably cold. You know, you want to put on your snow boots and things like that. But and we had, generally, most of us had one dhoti. So we would come back from Sankirtan, we would wash our dhoti out, hang it on the line, and then take it off the line when we came down from the hill in the morning and put it on. Now, if it had been raining, our dhoti was still going to be wet. Not a problem, because they were polyester, and your body heat would dry them during Mangalarti. So it was a little rough, and we didn't have money to buy food. We got our food from places I wouldn't want to describe in public, and so it was pretty rough. Still, I found that life a relief for a while. Why? Because I didn't have to deal with women, and I didn't have to deal with money, and I had my heart broken, and I was kind of not particularly inclined to work hard to take care of myself. Before I moved into the temple, after I had recently gotten out of the Navy, and I worked day labor jobs when I needed money for rent or food or recreational substances. It's the 60s. And so that was it for me. But after 2.5 or 3 years, I began to see that wasn't really sustainable for me. I needed companionship. And so I got married, and I got lucky. I had a wife. I got a wife who was not crazy, and who, frankly, is quite a saintly person. If you ask anyone in Alachua, they'll tell you, Mother Satyaki is a saint. She's also a real person, but she's a very generous. So I had 40 years. Doesn't mean the 40 years was a happy marriage. It doesn't mean there weren't rough days. Frankly, there were days when I wasn't sure that men and women were meant to live together. Because we do experience the world quite differently. So this is the part that I'm supposed to say, right? Household life is full of trouble. It's nothing but tribulation. Because we're going to make demands of our wives, and they're going to make demands of us. And each of us, to the extent that we're not Krishna conscious, lives pretty much as if we were the center of the universe. I mean, really, isn't it? The things that are close to us are important. What happens in California is important. I'm a fifth generation Californian. So when I heard about the wildfires in Los Angeles, I mean, generally, wildfires in Los Angeles, they burn the kind of suburban areas, Malibu Canyon or Topanga Canyon or someplace like that. And the people who are foolish enough to build expensive homes out there, they might lose their homes. But this was an urban, this was town. This was a fairly densely populated area and big. And it was these horrible firestorms. And I used to make jokes about, if we have a rainy, if we have rain in the winter in California, we lament. Okay, so it's nice. There's maybe the snowpack's nice. There's going to, there's going to be irrigation for the fields in the San Joaquin Valley and other places. There are not so much agriculture everywhere else because it's all been built up. But that means there's going to be a lot of undergrowth. And when the rain stops and everything dries out, horrible, we're going to have a horrible fire season all summer into the fall. And if it doesn't rain much in the winter, everything is going to be tinder dry starting in the spring. And we're going to have a terrible fire season. It's not even a good joke anymore. That's just simply not funny. We had the same thing in Hawaii. We had this 5 days. 5 days there was a hurricane, maybe a couple 300 miles to the south of the Hawaiian Islands. And we had 5 days of sustained winds of between 50 and 60 miles an hour. It was crazy. And gusts of up to 80. It was just, it was something else. And because of those winds, some wildfires started right near Lahaina and pretty much completely wiped out this town. It was sort of a big part of the economic lifeblood of that island. And frankly, of the state. So because it happened in the islands, it was close. It was heartbreaking. I have a lot of friends who live on Maui. I lived on Maui myself a long time ago. So things that are close to us, we see as important, and things that are very far away. So there's some problem in Myanmar. Where in the world even is that? It's pretty close to India. We kind of live like that. So sometimes there's going to be headbutting. If we're not considerate enough of each other's needs. Srila Prabhupada gave the example once when he was speaking at the University of Hawaii in 1972. The difference between the kind of society we live in, where each of us kind of sees ourselves as the center of the universe, and an actual Krishna conscious, God-centric society that he talks about in the purport to the second verse of the Bhagavatam, a competitionless society with God at the center. So he gave the example of a pond. You've got a pond and it has this nice, peaceful surface, very tranquil surface. If you drop a stone in the pond, from the point where the stone strikes the surface of the pond, it's going to radiate circles. And it's a nice, peaceful pattern, concentric circles radiating from it. So if I drop a stone, and we've got this, if Nikunjanayaka drops a stone, going to have this nice peaceful pattern until his ripples run into my ripples. And then Vrindavan drops a stone. We all drop stones in the pond and it's chaotic. That's how we're living now. We're living in a world like that. But if we take all those stones and drop them in the same place, drop them in exactly the same point, we just have this continuous pattern of concentric circles radiating from that point. What's the antonym of concentric? Pop quiz from the English professor. Eccentric. Off center, right? So there are going to be those things. And then when we have children, by the time they're 2, they start to get a little sense of swaratness, right? Swaratva. And their favorite word becomes, well, we don't have moms and dads in the room except for me, no. Right? Sometimes that toddlerhood is referred to as their first adolescence. And then they have their second adolescence, especially for boys. We became trouble when we were 10, when we were in the 5th grade. And then there's those teenage years, for which I wanted to apologize to my mother when she was dying. So there's a lot of trouble, and then we have to worry about getting a job. You got to get into the best school for your field so that you have the best job opportunities. So we want to study data science at MIT or Caltech or Stanford, or we want to study law at Harvard or Yale, or maybe Georgetown as well, or where I was thinking of going to law school when I was a boy. University of Virginia has a very well reputed law school, or whatever it is. And so there's that struggle to get, to get good grades, do all the extracurricular stuff when you're in high school, and so that you get good letters of recommendation, so that you can get into, so that you can have, you can have like a 4.8 GPA out of 4 points. People do that nowadays because of AP courses are more heavily weighted. I had kids, I know a little bit about this, although my kids weren't that kind of people. They're both kind of more artistic. My daughter actually had an opportunity to go to Cal Arts, California Institute of the Arts. And she said, I don't want to do anything so exclusive. I'm fine with the state school. She's kind of a very laid back, cool person. So all these things are going on. And then you've got conflicts at work, got conflicts with your boss. So say you get a job with the federal government, and all of a sudden one day you get an email from Elon Musk that says, tell me 5 things that you did last week. Oh, and by the way, if I don't get a response from you, consider that your resignation. And even if you do that, you're still going to get an email that says, you're fired, pack up your box now, don't wait for lunch. All these things are going on. This is our life as householders, and it is a lot of trouble. But brahmachari life can also be a lot of trouble. When we live together in the ashram, sometimes there are also going to be conflicts, because I've got my ego. My friend Charan Kanti, I love him dearly, but he has his ego. My friend Sasi Shekhar has. Actually, we all got along pretty well. There was one brahmachari when I was a brahmachari. I won't share his name, who just drove everybody a little bit nuts. It was part of the reason that during my first year as a full-time devotee, I actually left the temple 3 times. Once for 3 weeks, once for, I think it was 3 days. And another time, well, it was turned into a couple of months, because all my friends in Honolulu were a little tired of my being a bum, and they weren't going to put up with me anymore. So I ended up going back to San Diego and spending a little time with my mom and brother and sister again, until I was able to save enough money from a car wash job to get back to Honolulu and move back into the temple. So as the Buddhists say, wherever we go, there we are, right? Whether we're living in brahmachari life, or in household life, or living as sannyasis, there's always going to be some problem. With sannyas, there's all kinds of expectations for you to be perfect in every way. You can't see women, you can't touch money, you can't have any interests outside of preaching. The danda that we carry, is it's composed of 3 bamboo rods. Actually, Gaudiyas have 4. And they symbolize complete dedication of kaya, mana, and bhakti to the service of the Lord. And we include a 4th to symbolize our very self. And everyone expects you to be perfect in that. They expect you not to be a real person. Sorry to disappoint. As my godbrother Ritadvaja Swami says, anybody ever met Ritadvaja Swami? What label does he carry? I'm just a human being who happens to wear saffron. I'm a real person. So, and we have real problems sometimes to deal with. We have health problems. Sometimes we want to go somewhere. Someone like me, I do have 2 nickels to rub together, because I did work for a few years and I have a little income from Social Security. But I have to watch those nickels and dimes if I want to go anywhere, even to one of the neighbor islands. So there's always going to be problems. Wherever we go, there we are. So what we need to do, what's best for us, is to look into our hearts and see which set of struggles best suits our character at this particular point in our lives. And for me, after about a little over 3 years as a brahmachari, I really, it was really clear to me that it was that wasn't sustainable in a long-term way. So I got married. Others didn't. And we have some examples of sannyasis who have been able to maintain themselves in that ashram for decades. My godbrother Tripurari Maharaj will be celebrating 50 years as a sannyasi this next month. Priyananda Maharaj took sannyasi even earlier. And so wherever, whatever our status of life is, the main thing is our dedication to our practice and our service, our sadhana and our seva. Because Srila Prabhupada explained many times that if our lives are dedicated in these three ways, that our work, words, and thoughts are dedicated to the service of the Lord, it doesn't matter what our status of life, doesn't matter what our ashram is, doesn't matter how we dress. That's sannyas. We see that in the Bhagavad Gita as well. So King Yudhishthira, understanding where he was in his life, retired from managing the kingdom and went to the Himalayas with his brothers and their wife Draupadi, leaving King Parikshit in place after he's been properly trained and after everyone has been able to ascertain that he is every bit as qualified as King Parikshit. So that those verses in the 11th canto, Sve Sve Dikariya Nishta Saguna Kirtita, that applies to King Yudhishthira as well. So that's some of the thoughts that this verse brings up, especially in the company of single men wondering, which way do I go? We go straight ahead, wherever that takes us. Wherever we are, especially, we understand that the path of bhakti that we see in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Madhurya Kadambini, but at the beginning, this path will seem narrow and bumpy and tortuous, real twisty, maybe even torturous, right? Maybe even really painful. But as we make progress, it becomes smoother, more level, and broader. And by the time we get through anartha nivritti, through nishta, especially to ruchi, then it doesn't mean there won't be winds from the wrong direction or a little wavering here and there. It happens even in the stage of bhava, as we see in the case of King Bharat. But it becomes, easier. And whatever our status of life, we can, if we are able to choose discerningly, then our path will become easy. I should have stopped a long time ago to entertain discussion. I apologize. But I'll stop now.
Do we have maybe two? Yeah. Maybe we can take one question.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for coming and giving the valuable time. We're very grateful to have you.
Oh, I'm grateful to have you.
I really like the words that you mentioned, Sve Sve Adhikariya Nishtha Saguna Parikirtita. And the example you mentioned about the concentric circles versus eccentric. I always like that example from Srila Prabhupada in Science of Self-Realization. I think he mentions that also.
Yeah, he mentioned it a couple of times.
Yeah. Maharaj, about real sannyas, we see in Bhagavad Gita 6.1, Krishna says, Anashrita karma param karyam karma putya sannyasi chayogi cha na niravne na chakya. So there's a very broad definition of sannyas. Anybody who's dedicating his mind, body, and words for the service of Krishna. So, how is the social status as a sannyasi different from that broad definition of sannyas? I mean, Krishna is giving, anybody is, we also say that for a brahmachari, even a grihastha is a brahmachari if he is engaging only for the purpose of Krishna conscious children. So, how do we what is the differentiating factor from that broad category? We also see that in Mahaprabhu he says, I'm not a Brahman, I'm not a Kshatriya. But he is following sannyas, he is following the rules and regulations of sannyas. So why do we have these two things? One where we are very strict, stay away from women as a brahmachari or as a sannyasi. At the same time, we have a broad definition of brahmachari as well as sannyasi, and we are saying we are neither brahmachari. No. So it seems like there are so many concepts. How do we put them together?
Yeah. Well, one distinction is the kind of facility and deference that may be offered to someone in the sannyasa ashram, because it's generally a kind of a terrible vow. At my sannyasa initiation, my sannyas guru told a joke. My name is Bhakti Abhyasa Ashram, and he picked that name for me, I think with some care. He says because the ashram can be a scary place, especially the sannyasa ashram. And it took some doing for me to prepare to enter that ashram. So he told a joke about a guy who sold his soul to the devil. And he had been taken on a tour of hell because he had some trepidation about, say, well, hell for eternity, that doesn't sound like such a good deal. So Satan took him on a tour of hell, and it was people sitting around the pool with their drinks, the ladies and everything's going on, it's all just like a resort. And the guy says, "Oh, cool, okay." So he signed his soul to the devil. He had all the success in his life, and when his life was up, the devil came to collect, sent his henchmen to come and take the guy's soul, and he took him to the pit of fire. And the guy says, "Wait, this is literally not what I signed up for. Let me talk to the boss." So they take him to Satan's office, and he says, "Satan, what's the deal? Where's the Mai Tais? Where's the girls? Where's the pool?" And Satan says, "Oh, that's for the guests." So I had I may be the only sannyasi whose initiation includes a joke about the sannyasa ashram. And part of the problem, at least for people like me with the ashram, is that deference. You walk into a room and everybody hits the deck. Well, my habit for many, many years was when somebody offers obeisances, you offer obeisances back. But I got in trouble doing that the minute I took sannyas. And, and people, so that can also be, it's a lot of responsibility because we're meant to exemplify that dedication. And the reason for not becoming intimately associated with women is to avoid that kind of entanglement so that we can actually be swarat. There's a passage in the 11th canto, I think it's the Abhadhuta Brahmana, who says that I have no interest in any of these things, therefore I wander the world like a child. And that's how a sannyasi is supposed to be. We're supposed to be independent of things. We're supposed to be independent of the problems of management, although many sannyasis get drawn into that. Some because they're qualified and some because they just happen to be there, and it causes a lot of trouble for them. So the real thing is that dedication. And we're meant to be symbols of of what that dedication was all about. And we're meant to have that freedom to go everywhere and speak to all kinds of people, and see if we can find that spark of bhakti, wherever we can find that spark of bhakti, and try to fan it. That's what we're looking for. Prabhupada used to tell us that Brahmins on every street corner. You just have to be open. So that's why we would go out into the streets, and here we still do. Go out into the streets and confront people. My friend Subhadra been doing that in San Diego, and she tried it yesterday at Dolores Park, and she said, "Oh man, I forgot what a tough gig San Francisco can be." She did get a book out yesterday, but apparently with considerable effort, with a lot of people just kind of like shrugging her off. In household life, the distractions are there generally. I've said before that Vaisheshika and Nirakula, they've been exemplary householders. He had his businesses, and now his only business is the family business. But even with those businesses, he was still always inspiring people, still always preaching. He was still always who he's always been, when he joined as a boy. And so that's a rare thing, but there's certainly an example of a household couple where Kaya, Mana, and Bhakti are all completely dedicated to the service of the Lord. He made time he set aside time and energy to do his multi-pure and whatever other businesses he had going. But they were there to support them as a family, and then especially once he moved here, to support his project of establishing a center here in the South Bay area. So and so there's a sense in which the distinctions are superficial, but they're also they can be essential in the sense that the sannyasis are meant to serve as an inspiration. And some do it by being very, very aloof, very detached. And some are a little more, I don't know, I've sometimes been described as down to earth or real or authentic. And so, like, we were joking yesterday about Bhakti Vikash Maharaj, the difference of traveling with someone like me and traveling with someone like Bhakti Vikash Maharaj. I would be nervous as heck traveling with Bhakti Vikash Maharaj. We have different perspectives on everything, and we live very differently. He's like the icon of staunch sannyas, and he's good at it, and it seems natural for him, and it inspires so many people, and that's wonderful. Other people find people like Pratutya Swami and me also inspirational. I'm not afraid to talk with women. I'm not afraid to hang out with young people. And sometimes it's just hanging out with them, just listening. I don't always have to be, preaching to them. By listening, I kind of see where they are, and I can try to meet them there, and then draw them help draw them closer to the goal, which is also good for me. So that that's kind of how I focus. So we may have different approaches, but the idea is that that life of dedication is meant to serve as an inspiration for others, and also to cut us free, completely free from anything. We're able to go anywhere. A little over 5 years ago, I was living in Western North Carolina, but I got called back to Hawaii to help maintain and grow the temple there. And that wasn't necessarily my idea, but it's where I ended up, and it's been good for me. And I'm told, although we still have our problems, I'm told that it's been good for the center, and that's what I'm told by pretty much all the devotees there. So, and would Bhakti Vikash Maharaj have thrived there? Maybe. But we also see that some of those, like, of course, these are sannyasis who weren't able to maintain the sannyasa ashram, that they come to Hawaii and it was just too weird for them. And so that the strict sense of sannyasa is meant to inspire people to live according to those broad senses of sannyas that we see in the Bhagavad Gita. The main thing is etansa astaya paratmanishtam, just determination to cross over the ocean of birth and death, whatever it takes. So when I get up in the morning, the very first thing I say is that prayer, reminding myself, this is what I did. I did this. I made this commitment to live as a sannyasi. Just reminding myself, this is how you're going to live this day. I sometimes feel like I'm in Grihastas Anonymous. Because if I'm thinking, oh my God, I have to live like this for the next 20 years, and that's not inconceivable that I might have 20 years left, even at my age. My dad lived to be almost 95. If I'm thinking like that, it's like an alcoholic or a meth addict or someone thinking, oh my God, I have to stay straight. I have to stay sober for the rest of my life. But no, today, I'm going to be straight today. I'm going to be sober today. And then tomorrow you do it again. And then, so when I wake up, I have this kind of Bhuta Shuddhi sequence. And so I start out, etansa astaya paratmanishtam. And then the next one is naham vikramachadarikirna. I'm not that. I'm not really that. I really am just Krishna's servant, and that's what the sannyasa is about. And then I have other prayers that kind of narrow it down, reminding me of the ultimate internal goal of my life. But I start with that. Oh, yep, I did this. Yes. What is your name?
Vishal.
Vishal.
Yeah. Jayadeva Swami Maharaj has this book about Vanaprastha Ashram, and he frequently talks about Vanaprastha and how that's one aspect that's kind of missing in the ISKCON community. Can you comment on how we can actively live a life where we naturally feel like Vanaprastha Ashram is for us, in case someone goes to Grihastha Ashram?
Yeah. Vanaprastha Ashram is an intermediate stage moving on from the Grihastha Ashram. And, classically we think of Vanaprasthas as traveling, husband and wife traveling together on foot from one tirtha to another. Sometimes they're referred to as anchorites, which is kind of a funny sounding word because they're actually unanchored, right? They've left behind the responsibilities of household life, and their main activity is working together to, as it should have been in their grihastha life, but at this stage, even more focused. How that looks nowadays is can be quite varied, I think. We have some vanaprasthas who will live in an ashram and serve. Others, my wife and I, when we were living in Southern California, in San Diego, we actually had an idea when it was time for us to stop working. When the girls were grown and on their own, and we no longer had to work. We had this idea because we were living in the Southwest. We weren't in Hawaii anymore, but we were living on the mainland, living in the Southwest. We thought we would establish, we would travel to different places, maybe kind of establish a circuit, and then we would get an RV and just kind of travel, be like circuit preachers. So that's another possible model. Or you go out, as we intended to do when we first got married, you go out and establish a center somewhere. Maybe someplace where there isn't a community of devotees, and we grow a community of devotees. Or you can go live in a town like Mayapur or Puri or Vrindavan, and and just give yourself to serving the devotees in whatever way, depending on the gifts that you have to offer, and sometimes eventually, then maybe the husband will take sannyas. So it can look very different. I haven't read Jayadvaita Maharaj's book, and there's another book as well, just published by Devaki Devi Dasi. Can't remember who her guru is. She's German.
Niranjana Swami Maharaj.
Pardon?
Niranjana Swami.
Oh, yes, that's right. She's Niranjana Maharaj's disciple. And Devaki can be a little intimidating to some people because she's very firm. But she's actually, I found her to be a nice lady. And she said, my book will provide a different perspective on the Vanaprastha ashram than Jayadvaita Maharaj's. Because we know Jayadvaita Maharaj is also very, well, he was, he went from brahmacharya to sannyas when he was still relatively young, I think in the 80s, late 70s or the early 80s or something. And among the sannyasis in ISKCON, he's the one sannyasi who we know files his financial statement with the sannyas ministry, because he also publishes it. He'll put it on Facebook or whatever social media he's using. And you'll see his income is maybe $24,000 over the course of the year. And he'll tell you, he spent this much on travel, he's gave this much in charity to different temples or different projects or something like that. And he's got this much left in his bank account. He spent this much on medical needs or something like that. So he's very strict. He's also, once you get to know him, an easy person to get along with. He's very plain spoken, which can be off-putting. But he's actually a very kind, open-hearted person. And those of the few devotees who've been accepted by him as disciples will be able to tell you that how accommodating he can actually be. So the Vanaprastha, that's a big project. So we've got a conversation started. Is Jayadvaita Maharaj's book, has it been released yet?
No.
No, but he's always talking about it. He's working on it, just like he did with his Kirtan standard books. He brings it up in classes. He gets feedback from other devotees, and that's going to, you look at the Kirtan And we never see him. And then he comes back to the temple and he starts doing service, and you realize he's got this amazing service now. Pratama Muni gave up his life living the very, gave up his austere life living in the ashram, married this very qualified woman. And what was the result of that marriage? They lived very comfortably for a long time. And then they had a son who just happened to be the Supreme Personality of God. Right? So that's the result of that nice family life. So if we judge people by these external things, what their social status is, what their job is, then we might miss out on something that's actually really essential, and that is that they do have gifts to offer, but living in a brahmacharya ashram is not the place where they're going to be able to offer those gifts. Srila Prabhupada never encouraged George Harrison to move into the ashram, although I think he brought it up. The Prabhupada told him, no, what you're doing is important. People listen to you. You have prestige. And people listen to you. So use that in Krishna's service. He never, although Ambarish lived as a brahmachari, he was just a married man for a while. He eventually married. He married this beautiful woman from an aristocratic Bengali family who has a PhD in some science or something. And they have these two wonderful daughters, and he's offering the two of them, Ambarish and Swahari, offer so much service to Srila Prabhupada's mission, because he didn't just walk away from his family. He wasn't told to walk away from that wealth. It's Maya. Instead, he's served whatever capacity he had with Ford Motor Company, and was able to grow that wealth, and especially when his mom passed away. He said, well, when my mom dies, I will be very wealthy, because she's the connection to him before. Interestingly, she married her before. So that's kind of my other take on part of the meeting. That it's a way of helping us understand that if we simply judge by these kind of external measures, the people pleasing and box checking kind of stuff that we tend to do in an institution, it's natural, but it can also be stifling. I've heard that from so many people, and I have to do some of it myself as well. And it can, be a little, make it hard to breathe sometimes. So that's now the pin's out. Thank you for noticing that. Otherwise, I would have walked away and I would look in the box and I thought, oh, wait, where's that pin? Thank you.
His
Thank you
Holiness
so much.
Bhakti Abhyasa Maharaj ki